Good evening. Welcome tonight. I'd like to call the Jail and Law Enforcement Courts Committee meeting to order. Justice Deakins, would you lead us in the prayer and the pledge?
Absolutely. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you tonight for all your many blessings on our country and our county. We ask that you be with us tonight as we make decisions. We ask that you be with all of our leaders at any level of government that they choose to serve. We thank you for your continued blessings. Please be with us as we travel to and from this meeting. These things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move adoption of the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Agenda is approved. Item 4, Juvenile Detention Monthly Statistics Report, Jeannie Mack.
Good afternoon. If you've had a chance to review the statistics, we have gone down since last month, so that's a good thing. We went from 36 as our average daily population to a little over 19. So that's a little more manageable for us. We are full-blown into our summer program with the teachers being out, so we have all kinds of people in the facility doing workshops with the youth. And juvenile court also has the diversion program. This is week 2 started today, so it's session 2 for the lower risk youth. And today they went to Crystal Bridges, had a workshop there, and also were able to do a hike and a tour. So they kept them for 8 hours today off the street, so that was a good thing. So, and they'll do that all week, and then we'll wrap it up at the end of July into August before school starts. We'll have one more week. So other than that, everything's a little bit slower, so we've calmed down a little bit. Any questions?
Justice Bowman.
I just noticed that there over half of the young people there were charged with felonies. Mm-hmm. And I just wondered if that's something you're seeing trending that way, or is that something just well, so that's all of 19, though. We got,
You know, summer, we get a little bit more because kids are out and about and not monitored as closely, and they're not in school and things like that. Mm-hmm. There's really no rhyme or reason.
well, one was burglary, breaking and entering, and theft of property.
Yes,
And I just amazed about that.
I know.
And these are all basically 15-year-olds.
That's our average age, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief Deputy Cantrell, the Enforcement Activity Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The enforcement side of the house, our calls for service were up a tick, about 300, probably directly related to the 200 more or 120 more 911 calls we got, but nothing out of the ordinary this past month. No violent crimes or anything that we had to investigate, so it's kind of business as usual on the enforcement side.
Okay. Phil got the report. Has anybody got any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Major Densler got the detention activity report.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Wish I could report the same thing as Jeannie said, Jeannie Mack, but business is good, as I usually say, and business is even better. As you can tell, our numbers are still going up. There's still bringing everybody to jail. As you see, the state prisoners is up a little bit, and federal prisoners. As far as our average board days, we've got 83 people on the floor and 39 females. They asked for that last time. And then to go into our graphs on our detention pretrial, I mean, it pretty well speaks for itself. It's still gaining, still growing, and our, like I say, our pretrial report is 393, so maybe down 6 or 7 than usually the 400 or 425. So, if you entertain any questions?
Any questions? Justice Madison?
Did you just call me sir? I was curious, I had seen, and you all may have seen it, but there was a Facebook post going around about how one acquires toilet paper at the jail. And that apparently it's very hard to come by, and for women that have, that time of month needs, that it's very challenging to get what you need. Can you elaborate on that for us a little bit?
Well, like just what you said, it was a rumor. You know, we have a set.
It's actually not a rumor, it's an email from the woman in the jail.
Right, if that's true. We make rounds, you know, we're in the cells every hour, 24/7. We have set policy and times that we issue out toilet paper and feminine hygiene or anything that needs to be done. So we're on a regular schedule, plus we're in that cell every hour, 24/7, if somebody needs anything else. Now, you know, a lot of this stuff that you hear that they want, they like to make pillows out of this stuff. They stuff them in their mats, rip the mats up so the mat's more comfortable, and there's lots of stuff that they do with that except what they're supposed to.
With toilet paper?
Yes, they take, you know, they'll take a roll, you know, we issue out, you know, it's either 2 or 3 times a week where they get their 1 or 2 rolls per person. So, you know, 32-man cell, that'd be 60, at least 60 rolls go in there. So they make pillows. I mean, you know, some of them they've been there, you know, 3, 6, 8 months. They figure out how to try to make it as comfortable as possible.
Well, do you have to turn back in the empty roll to get a new one?
Yes, you're supposed to. But, you know, if somebody's really needing it, they're going to get it. But that's their policy, because if you didn't, you know, it'd be a continuous battle.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, sir. You want to give us, you gave us both reports. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sheriff Helder, the ombudsman proposal. So everybody's aware, the sheriff contacted me last week and said that he was requesting this proposal and wanted to know if they could present it to us tonight, and I said yes. So they're going to present the information for our information, and we will have the opportunity to question, I think both the sheriff and the proposal. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, in keeping with spirit of cooperation and hearing things, I felt like it was the court's desire, at least this committee's desire, to look at different opportunities perhaps, or options, if you will, of trying to help reduce an overcrowded jail. One of the things that came up was the ombudsman position, to kind of look at the population maybe without the jaded eye that we may have. I don't know. I think that we're doing an excellent job of reducing that population, but I'm very much open to hearing from somebody that has some experience. Mr. Edelman assisted in this endeavor, and I won't steal his thunder. I'm going to let him talk to you a little bit about his experience and history, but he was exposed to the Washington County Jail back in the 90s. Under Kenneth McKee, and he performed a similar function. I'd like for him to talk to you about that, and that's the reason that I was kind of intrigued by him, because he's done it before. Should be able to come in with some experience and in-house knowledge of how Washington County works. I've known Stan for quite some time. He was on the civil service at Fayetteville. He was the criminal justice program, a law professor at the university. He is still performing those tasks now in Oklahoma, so I asked him to come to my office last week or week before, just for a sit-down, to kind of hear what he thought about the program. Was it something that we should be looking at? And then we took a tour of the facility so that he could have eyes on. The last time he was in our facility was before we moved in. He came and was one of the participants to kind of help us do some training. So with that, I asked him to put together that draft. And I told him, I said, look, there's no guarantee this is going to happen, but I said it certainly won't happen in an expedited manner if you don't do something on the front end, and that is to put a draft proposal together. Hopefully you've had time to look that over, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Edelman now to kind of go over that draft proposal and what his thoughts are on the program itself. So thank you.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman, members of the Quorum Court Committee, my name is Stan Edelman, and as the sheriff said, I've been a resident of Fayetteville since about 1997, taught at the university, had the honor of being on the Civil Service Commission for 6 years and its chair for a year, interviewed now Sheriff Helder and now Chief Greg Tabor. And one thing I can say from that experience, not to drag things out, but how impressed I was with how well managed the city was, and since it was police and fire, how well managed those departments are. And under the heading of the more things change, the more they stay the same. We were in kind of sort of the same circumstance in around 1999, 2000, 2001, when the jail was right across the street here. And for those of you who go back in time, there was no question at all back then. It was grossly overcrowded, it was outdated, there was a need for a new facility. And kind of as a way of, you could say, buying time, and kind of somewhat assessing our needs, then Judge Bill Story, who happened to be my backyard across the fence neighbor, asked me to come in and meet with the jail staff, meet with the jail detainees, with pretty much one goal in mind: identifying those persons who are in the jail really for no reason other than, they're certainly charged with crime, of course, but no reason other than that they're too poor to make even a modest bail. And as you know, the lowest bail that usually gets set is about $2,500, and $250 can get you out. People can't even post that amount. Over the course of about a year, with the help of a law student assistant from the university, we went into the old jail once or twice a week, and you could say, in a way, our best friends, so to speak, were the jail staff. Stan, you want to see John Jones? You want to see Mary Jones? You might be able to do something for that person. So I wouldn't overstate the numbers, but we were able to save the county back then. This is almost 20 years ago. I'd say some substantial, I call them bed days. That's my unit of currency. One person serving, being in detention for one less day. And again, the goal was simply to kind of try and stem the tide until the county could identify what is now the location of its present jail. And there was some learning that we did from that experience, which is that there was, and I'm convinced is and remains, a population that is not a threat to you or me, that is probably not there on dangerous felony charges. And the question then and the question now is, what should we be doing to try and make sure that the precious, limited, costly jail space is saved for those who we really don't want next door to us, for those who are truly dangerous, truly flight risks. There are persons who need to be in jail, But again, our experience then and our experience now is that there's a population, and Sheriff Helder talked about it in terms of are there efficiencies we can be achieving. I don't know if I would think of it in terms of efficiencies, but how can we get at that population that is not a danger and get them out of the jail, and not in a political sense at all, because on the fiscal sense, it saves money and taxpayers' money, and on sort of the social justice scale, people who don't need to be in jail shouldn't be in jail. So this time around, it kind of arose out of the proposals the Quorum Court heard over the last couple of months. I come here really as a friend of the Quorum Court, having worked with you all, even though I don't think any of you were on the court back then, as a friend of the sheriff and law enforcement, as a friend of the interest groups who are kind of pointing out the need to try and see how we can minimize the incidence of jail. As a society, in general, as a society, we incarcerate a large percentage of our population per capita. I think that goes for our state and our county as well, and that's not to point any fingers, but to say, and I think it's pretty well agreed, that there are people in jail who don't need to be in jail. And the present proposal, again, I've asked to kind of come back and reprise the act, is the present goal is with the Ombudsman Project, is to see if we can identify persons who don't need to be in jail, to see if there are alternatives. I can also say this from experience I've had working at the Seven Hills Homeless Shelter. I assist in the legal services desk program there, and we see the same people. They're in and out of jail. They're not public enemy number one. They get an arrest, they get on probation or fined, they don't make their payment, they're found in violation, a warrant comes down, and kind of in the trade that's called doing life on the installment plan. Not persons doing time for serious felonies. So, and not to draw it out too much, a lot of the persons who come into the jail are persons who have also come through the homeless shelter system. A lot of them are persons with mental health issues and needs, alcoholism, drug needs, other needs that aren't met, inability to even find or be able to get a job and hold down a job, how to write a resume, basic life skills. And these are the people who are in and out, in and out, in and out. Again, I wouldn't be asking the sheriff or police or any judge to let anybody out whom they think is a genuine risk to public safety. Having said that, I'm fairly well convinced from last time around and from working at the shelter that there is more that we can be doing. Exactly what more, I can't tell you at this point, but the sheriff has asked me to draft up a proposal, and the word draft is so important, I put it in 3 places at the top of the page. It's a thought, it's an idea program, but the one thing I want to lead with, which to me is kind of irreducible, non-negotiable, if you will. The guiding principle is that no person should be detained in the Washington County Jail awaiting trial solely because of poverty. I emphasize the word solely. There are other reasons why people get remanded to jail or can't make bail. And that's the aim, that's the goal of the project, the same as it was 17 or 18 years ago, if the Quorum Court should see fit to proceed with this. Once again, I would hope to contact the law school, either this law school or other law schools in the area, to try to get law student assistance on this project. Again, come into the jail with the support and assistance of Sheriff Helder and his staff, again, to try and identify those persons who can be safely released, what kind of alternative mechanisms can be used, and if there's any kind of structural change to maybe suggest and propose to kind of keep that in mind as well. So that is my background. It's a draft proposal. I believe that I attached my resume, my CV, but I have a copy with me if the justices of the peace wish to see that. But criminal law, criminal justice has been sort of my my home base as a law teacher at the University of Arkansas in Tulsa and elsewhere. I will be teaching a little farther away this coming year in Oklahoma City, but I will be there 3 days a week. I'll be here on the weekends plus Monday and Friday, so I will have time that I can devote to this project. That's kind of the gist of it, to see what we can do to minimize, to try and keep those detention numbers major denser pointed out, to try and keep those as minimal as possible. Be happy to take any questions.
Questions? Justice Deakins.
Thanks for taking the time this evening, Mr. Adelman. Let me ask you, after your work's complete, what kind of final report, what do you, and I know your work might take you down different avenues, but what would you foresee that final report looking like?
What I did last time around with the members of the Quorum Court at that time was I submitted a monthly, just a quick statistical summary. How many detainees had we seen? How many had we sought to help? And what were the ways in which we did seek to get a bail reduction or an ROR order? Did we seek to get some kind of alternative form of release? And kind of a batting average, who we were able to get. And the bottom line each month was, again, the unit of currency I used was bed days saved. So I suppose if we're going to enter into this partnership and this project, again, I would probably be reporting in writing to the Quorum Court monthly and come before you in person as need be. At the end of the project, I mean, who knows what, there's a lot of unknowns right here. Nobody can point with certainty to, well, how many people can we safely release from the jails? We might get some learning, some experiential education out of that. So I'm not envisioning it like, pardon the expression, the Mueller report, where there's going to be a final report at the end of a project period. It's going to be sort of a month-by-month accounting of how we're doing.
So it would be your goal that we could get boiled down to some hard numbers of exactly how.
I would hope so. And again, I don't want to oversell or overpromise. We don't know kind of exactly what we're gonna come up with, but with the help, again, of some law students that we can train, I think we will be in the jail, and again, that the sheriff's staff would be helping us, and then we can kind of get, for everybody, not, certainly not the least of which is this body here, to get kind of a better statistical handle, better statistical sense of what we're dealing with.
So I've kind of misunderstood, I guess, the premise here. It's not so much that you're going to deliver us a final report after you've studied it. It's more of a cooperative.
I'm not here to study.
Right.
I'm here to try and help.
I got you.
And probably, if we're talking about an actual report, I've got kind of minimal training in statistical analysis. That's not what I'm trained in. That's not what I teach. But someone can be able to take those numbers and maybe crunch them and give us, again, a better idea of what maybe there's some alternative ways that we haven't thought of yet. There's some alternatives to deal with.
But if you have changes that need to be implemented, let me just make sure that this is true, because I think this is any of our problems when we start talking about the jails and their population. It's going to have buy-in from both the judicial system and the detention system.
I'm really glad you mentioned the word buy-in. And number one, I promise I won't be shy about what I'm finding and what I have to recommend going either way. But in terms of buy-in, again, in my mind, it's really essential that at the county level, at the municipal level, police, judges, defense counsel, Fayetteville City Council, really the only way I can see to proceed is that everybody buys in to that basic non-political idea that nobody should be in jail simply because of poverty. So that we're on the same page as far as that goes. And from there, my mind is completely open as to what I'm going to find. I don't have a preconceived set of recommendations.
And in your background and your knowledge base, you think you have a good feel for alternatives and things like that, then just...
Yes, I think I do. Is there anything, is there anything new under the sun that no one has thought of before? I'm not sure about that, but maybe there are some modalities, if you want to call it that, that we haven't really tried. Have we really tried electronic monitoring, for example? Have we really tried house arrest? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just raising these questions. Are there alternatives that we can try with persons that we being primarily the judges, determined to be a reasonable risk, something other than what we've been doing now?
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Sure.
Mr. Chair.
Justice Harbison?
Well, this is actually something I've been looking for. Someone that is willing to step up and try to work with the different systems, with the judges, with the sheriff, and see if we can be more efficient and remove some of these people that from jail. We've had a person come in and talk about electronic monitoring. And so all of these things seem to come together in this program. That, there is one item, someone said, well, we need to build a pretrial building for pretrial people. Well, at this point, I don't think that's in the picture, but I think, the basic thing that I see that you can do is to look at these people and then get them out of jail and provide them with the services that they need.
Very much so.
Not just getting them out of jail and letting them do their own thing, and there will also have to be cooperation with the people that you are trying to help, because if they don't want to be helped, then it's not going to work. So there's two sides to this sword.
There's more than two sides.
Always two sides. And, but I think besides your salary, you're going to have volunteers to come in and to help you with these people. And I think, that this is something I would like for us you've set down a timeline till June of next year. And this might give us some time to look at if things like this work. And I've always said, I don't want this really tied to building the jail, because I feel this is a complete different issue. And with the growth that we have, I think at some point we have to look at the hard facts. Now, I think you can help, but I'm not sure that you can provide miracles.
Thank you.
But,
No, there's no magic bullet here.
But no, there's no magical, you're not going to go down there and release 400 people out of that jail next week. I mean, you might get 5 out, or 10 the next week, or 5. But this is not going to be a program that's going to release a real large number of people. I don't think. I hope it is. But I'm trying to be realistic about it. And I definitely would like to give you a chance to do this program. Thank you.
Thank you. And as I said, we won't know the numbers until we get there. And so we can't really sort of project or promise anything, but that will be learning we do as we go.
Justice Yanez?
Thank you. 2 questions. So can you describe the process that detainees would go through this project?
Well, again, from what we did last time around, maybe there's some ways we can change that for the better, but I or my students would go into the jail, let's say once or twice a week. The sheriff's staff, on the one hand, kept a sign-up sheet. These are people who want to see the ombudsman. And then sometimes, just as I said, the staff's own initiative, saying, Stan, maybe you can do something for John or Jane. So I come in, and there's a list of people who who've requested to see me. And usually they'll fit a certain profile of relatively low bail, and I'm just picking a number arbitrarily here, 2,500, 5,000, maybe 10,000. 1,000 will get you out on a $10,000 bail bond. Okay, and kind of where we want to do that initial cut. But so the people I would be likely to be seeing are people on relatively low bond. They can ask to see me if they have a outstanding warrant for kidnapping in the state of Oklahoma. They're not going anywhere. But again, if their history seems like a reasonable history in terms of not having serious violent prior felonies, people are going to have FTAs, failures to appear. I mean, if you disqualified them, you wouldn't have anyone to talk to. But again, looking to fit a certain profile, and if they fit that profile, well, do you have family in the county? Do you have family in the next state? Someone had an in-law who was willing to pledge the deed to the house. I mean, now that's faith for you. It's called a property bond. Pledge the deed to the house as a way of assuring that the person would be let out. So we see people. I would make my own determination whether this is something that might fly. And really, my audience is the judge. We're going to wind up making a proposal to the judge to modify the terms of detention or the terms of release. Judge Story, way more often than not, agreed with our recommendation, but not always. I mean, he had his own mind, as you well know. So it would be. I don't know if that answers your question about the process. Very informal. And we'll work up a face sheet to the number of people we see and kind of their criminal background. So we should have some records about again. I wouldn't suggest in statistical terms we're going to have a enormous sample size to draw mathematical conclusions from. But I think we'll have an idea of the people who we could reasonably request some alternative forms of release. And again, the starting point is people who appear to be there not because of dangerousness or flight risk, but simply too poor to bond out, even on a low bond.
Okay, just a follow-up question.
Sure.
How many failure to appears did you have?
I'm sorry, ma'am?
Failure to appears?
Some did. The only point to be made there is that a failure to appear does not really mean by itself a flight risk and a fugitive. Most FTAs never leave the neighborhood. Most FTAs were drunk or hungover or afraid to come into the court date. They're right there. We're not talking about flight risks, someone who's going to go terrorizing another county, another state. So FTAs you have to sort of consider sort of individually. And again, they're so common that if you just disqualified anybody for having an FTA in their record, we would hardly have anybody to see. Don't mean to sound cynical about that.
Oh, no. But so if they went through your process and they did not appear at court, what was that process then?
Well, the process in court, we're not talking about an ombudsman project. If someone doesn't appear in court, a judge issues a warrant. Sometimes it's called a default warrant or an FTA warrant. That nowadays, compared to 20 years ago, we're much more automated now. That goes into the local and I believe the national system, the NCIC. So as somebody who defaulted on a court appearance in Fayetteville gets picked up in Tulsa Police Department will scoop that right up and get that person back here. So the technology is way far advanced. So and in much more common sense, down to earth terms, Judge Bill Story would his saying was, I'm paraphrasing, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." He was pretty tough on FTAs. They could still come in and tell a story, and that doesn't mean the judge won't allow him or her out on bond. But point I was making is, again, most FTAs don't really go anywhere. They're still here. They're without the independent means to assume a new identity and go off on some island somewhere.
Great. And my last question, you made an amazing point that there's a lot of unknowns, right? For a lot of us on this court, probably all of us, this jail expansion or a study is a huge unknown. So on your services, what additional, because time's sensitive right now, like we are on a time crunch, what else would you recommend other than your services?
I'm not sure I'm getting your question.
So, time crunch?
Time-
We have your proposal here.
Yours or mine?
We have your proposal, right?
Yes, yes.
Other than your proposal, what else would you recommend for us to look at?
I'm not trying to duck the question. I think I'd be presumptuous to come up with recommendations before I've actually gotten in there and seen the population we're dealing with, and the population that we can and cannot help. I think a time frame of through next spring, next May or June, I think will give us sort of a basis of experience, and maybe even have shared recommendations for what way to proceed. But again, the golden rule, if you will, is nobody in jail simply because of poverty.
Got
I
it.
hope that doesn't sound like I'm avoiding your question.
No, we don't have the experience, right, with the justice system, and so we want to make sure we're doing a good job with a time crunch. So other than, what this proposal, what else can we be doing?
I kind of harken back to what Ms. Harbison said. If the county has been exploring things like electronic monitoring, how home confinement, those kinds of conditions, certainly the judges have to buy into that. But again, where I don't know to say with any sense of authority for you is the extent to which that's been tried, the extent to which that hasn't been tried, but just that we should be open to, again, all those possible modalities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Justice Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is I talked to our drug court judge, and she said that it would only cost, we'd have to add 2 people to double the size of drug court. Will you be looking at that as well?
I certainly would be, because I think the drug court in this county has been a model ever since Judge Gunn began it, again, 15 or so years ago. And it wasn't begun sort of as a jail space-saving initiative, but that's what it wound up being. And the key word there is intervention. We're doing an intervention, trying to get people out of that endless cycle of arrest, addiction, incarceration, to try and intervene and break the cycle. So I've been a big fan of that model.
Okay. I was at the recent graduation, and it was really impressive.
Oh, yeah.
It was really impressive to hear those graduates talking about coming out there and what they did for them.
I don't know if it's still proceeding this way, but back in Judge Gunn's day, it was on Fayetteville Public Access Television, and that was reality TV. When they were succeeding, she would come down off the bench and hug them and get their diploma, and she would, I won't characterize it, but she also knew how to do the opposite when somebody wasn't, or she would terminate them, and some people are or are not at the point where they're willing to try something like
Well,
that.
the graduates were very complimentary of the staff, the judge, and everybody else that got involved in their life, and there's obvious big changes going on. But the other thing I guess I understand is the judges make a major commitment on allowing people to go into the drug court. So we'll have to go ahead and try to work with the judges to get them to allow twice as many people to come in.
That's why I say this is not limited to the quorum court of the sheriff's department. This is countywide. This is for the judiciary to buy into, the police and the public defenders as well to buy into.
Okay, well, I guess my number one concern is, I think we've got great enforcement in Northwest Arkansas. I think Sheriff Helder and his people and the city people are doing a fantastic job. Number one, we've got laws, and they're asked to enforce those laws. And that's why these people show up in court, and that's why they show up in jail. So we know that the judges are very aware of our crowded population issue. They're turning 200 people a month loose down there already. And I guess it's getting to the point I'm wondering, I know we heard a lot about reducing these minor drug offenses. I have it seared into my mind the picture of one of our deputies being shot at with 2 full clips of ammo for trying to make a traffic stop. And he had been previously arrested for a minor drug charge that he didn't. And I'm saying, who's got the crystal ball that's going to be able to tell us which one of these guys are going to unload the ammo at us?
Not you, sir, not me, not anybody else. But if you take a few steps back, and this is something that I can say I've got some sort of learning on, scholarship on, is that the entire criminal justice system, there is no avoiding it. The entire criminal justice system is about management of risk. A judge that makes that decision, setting bond or making a sentencing decision, a police officer, should I arrest or not? The prosecutor, should I prosecute or not? Whenever you've got risks, there are going to be downside. There's no avoiding that. There's no guarantee.
I think you were at the sheriff's breakfast last month, and we heard about drugs coming in northwest Arkansas. I think it was the sheriff over in Harrison area, said he saw like 170-something pounds, I think it was meth, that came across the border. And he had never seen that much meth in his entire time of enforcement. And then the guys from enforcement out at the airport had a 4-pound shipment come in from the West Coast. We know that a lot of drugs are coming into northwest Arkansas, and it's creating a lot of these problems. And I'm saying I think we need to be careful
Absolutely.
about justifying all these folks with minimal drug charges, because we know what it leads to. And just like we saw about the juveniles a while ago, over half the juveniles are looking at felony charges, 15, 16 years old. We've got to enforce the law somehow. And if there's no penalty for breaking the law, where are we going?
Number one, I'm not sitting here advocating no penalty and no enforcement. Number two, to kind of broaden the perspective a little bit, there's no denying serious drug problems here and in every city, county, state in the country.
Yep.
What I can say, to put a little more perspective on it and maybe a little less of the scare into it, is that over the last 20 years, nationwide, felony crimes, violent felony crimes, crimes in general, if you carve out the drug problem, which is somewhat intractable, crime has been steadily down. Violent crime has been steadily down in our society for the last 15 or 20 years, and whether you attribute that to the population getting older, we have a serious drug problem, no doubt about that. But again, it's a little, you don't want to overstate that and go scaring people that we've got crime rampant in the streets. No, we've got one of the safer communities in the state.
Okay, thank you.
Justice Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think J.P. Yanez had it right when she said that it's pretty much more than one piece to this puzzle. And I feel like statistically we can look and see that ombudsman works. It works for counties in situations like this. I did a little research after visiting with Senator Bozeman when we were in Washington, D.C., and they gave us a link to grants that are available, and one of those grants is called Innovative Reentry Systems. It is a grant that's due by the 15th of June, so it's coming right up. But they have $7.5 million for county governments, 9 awards, $7.5 million, and it's all about preventing recidivism and improving public safety, giving resources, training, and technical assistance to counties. So I feel like this would be a grant initiative absolutely worth looking into quickly, because they could probably give us the kind of advice that we need to go from here, in addition to working with an ombudsman. Thank you.
Justice Ecke.
I only want to speak, Mr. Chairman, if all the other members on the committee, you're the chairman. Thank you, sir.
Go ahead.
Appreciate it.
I've got a couple questions.
Thank you for your report. I am not in favor of this because I see that this is duplicating what our sheriff's office is already doing. They have a lot of staff members, and there's a lot of oversights, federal and state oversights that they have to meet. with the toilet paper and whatever else is out there. You have inspectors that come in to make sure that everybody is treated well. They get better health care in jail than I do. I mean, they can go see the dentist anytime they want. They can go see whoever. They also have nutritionists if you have special needs. So a lot of their needs are being taken care of. I think this is duplicating what's already being done at our sheriff's office. Number two, the slope on, you said the guiding principle is poverty level people. But poverty level people trying to bail out committed a crime that warranted them to get in jail.
Sure.
And when you commit a crime, it doesn't matter how old you are or how rich you are, you committed the crime, correct?
I would,
You committed a crime.
No.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be there. I mean, I'm just going logically, just logically speaking.
the
But the
only issue,
bonds,
ma'am, I
but
would
the
take,
slope of the bond, what I'm saying is all we have to do, if they cannot bond out, then that is between the judge and the prosecutor. That is an easy fix. And we can implement a system that enables them to do that and to bond out. But what it seems like is your guiding principle is just for those who are in poverty that can't bail out. You said that's your guiding principle.
well, the
So
guiding
that just
principle
goes
would-
against my common sense and logic
Yeah,
in why are you there to begin with?
if I can respond. Maybe the most important word in that guiding principle is solely because of poverty. So that if somebody has money and there's a $5,000 bond set, they can bond out. If somebody is simply unable to make that bond, they're in jail. And there's an economic, I guess you could call it a question of fairness there, whether somebody with the money can get out and the person without the money can't. Secondly, I'm here at Sheriff Helder's request.
Oh, I
So
understand.
I'm not looking to duplicate anything. I'm looking to work in concert with the sheriff. So this
No,
is
I
kind of,
understand that, but
Yeah.
what I read here, this draft is duplicating a lot of what we already have in place. So, I mean, and like you said, it's just a draft.
yeah.
Maybe you can work together and say, okay, we will not duplicate this. The third point I want to make is the slippery slope. Budgeting for your position, my goodness, if we can't get life vests for our sheriff's department, for those patrols that go out there, I don't see how we can pay for this salary to do an analysis on something that we all already know. At the bottom line is, we already know. We have a population growth that the county is experiencing, which is great, but along with that, there is increased crime. But that's stated, everybody already knows that. And I don't see how we can justify this salary in our budget. So those are three questions. I'm sure other people have other things that they want to say, but I think we're already doing all of these things, and we just have to tweak with our judges to say, make it affordable to those who are impoverished. Thank you.
Justice Madison?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me say I'm very supportive of the proposal you have put before us. I personally know people who have been in jail on failures to appear for as long as 3.5 months. And the only reason he was there was lack of money and a low IQ. I mean, on any given day where he lives, there may or may not be transportation. There is no public transportation. And they often don't have a calendar or clock that works, or their phones are on charge. It's a different kind of world than some of us live in. But at the same time, I would have been happy and comfortable having that person stay at my house. I've been on long road trips with him. So there are people in jail that certainly are not a danger to us, and I applaud you for what you're doing. I wonder, I'm going to have a caveat in a minute, but I wonder if you could give us some ballpark of the cost of this project.
Well, the sheriff asked me to kind of, to put some numbers there. And the salary that I would be asking for is not the salary that I would get if I were a civil attorney or a criminal defense attorney. That'd be like $200, $250 an hour. The salary that I'm proposing is $60 an hour.
More like a professor's salary.
More like a professor's salary, with help from law students. And in terms of cost and benefit, I was talking before in terms of bed days. If we save X number of bed days per month, that's kind of paying for the program. They're probably paying for the program and then some. So that's what I would consider, just because I was asked to put a number on that. And that would be, I would anticipate, again, I'll be here half the week starting in August. So I'd be coming into the jail maybe once or twice a week. No more than 20 hours, probably most likely less than that. So again, that would be the cost, and kind of comparing that to the cost of housing and feeding and guarding more detainees. It's kind of hard to.
Okay, so you don't really have a package price at this point?
Beg your pardon?
You don't have a package price at this point?
What I have is my proposal, draft proposal before you, and that's for your consideration. But as far as I'm concerned, pretty much everything in the draft is subject to discussion.
Okay. Well, the one concern that I have is for the county to be writing a contract specifying whom we're going to hire. I think as a public body, we have some obligation to open the applications to see if other people might be qualified. Now, these credentials seem to be, fairly restrictive, and I know some public agencies locally that are very creative with their advertising will advertise for someone that's had 2 years and 3 months in a congressional office and has blue eyes or something, where you can pretty much read the ad and say, I know who they want to hire here. And I'm not suggesting we do that, but I would feel better if we were more open to who else might possibly want to have these same credentials. And I am not smart enough to know in the community who else is there, and you certainly do seem unique, but it's just unusual to put a name in a contract like this. But I do want to see the program go forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we're going to do Justice Madison and then Justice Pond, and then we're going to decide what we're going to do with this issue. Justice Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Professor Adem, I think it's been a long time since I've seen you, probably since I was in law
Yes,
school.
you were in my class, but you were in my moot court argument, I remember.
Yes. So I just wanted to say thank you for bringing this to our attention. We are looking for creative solutions for our situation at the jail, and I think in our overall criminal justice system in Washington County. So I appreciate the willingness to serve. I know that $60 an hour for an attorney is a bargain. And so I thank you. I'm curious to know a little bit more about the history of your program with Judge Story. How long did that last?
That lasted, I think, a little more than a year.
Okay.
And so I went into the jail. Again, I had a student helping me. And then just like now, along came TU, University of Tulsa. They hired me to teach for the year, and that kind of took me out of it. But by the end of that year's time, I think the county and the quorum court had kind of reached some closure about not only the need for the jail, that was not in dispute then, but also where to site it, what it would cost, and kind of the bonding process or whatever was required to finance it. Again, we were buying time so that the county could, in a good sense, spin its wheels to identify and locate and decide how to fund and pay for the cost of the new jail, which is now the present jail. So we kind of put ourselves out of business. Once the new jail was up and running, there was kind of an end point in sight.
Okay. And then when, I'm assuming, having been a law student, law students would probably go in and do a lot of the legwork, sort of interviewing folks. Because I guess I'm trying to figure out, I don't see that there's anybody at the jail already doing that. So I don't know that we have time to be interviewing folks down there about their financial situations and their access to, people with homes they're willing to
I
put
think
up?
Sheriff Helder can better answer that, but
Okay.
again, the staff knows whom they are housing, whom they are guarding, and I think they have a good handle on the population that are in there. So to what extent we are, or would be, or would not be duplicating what's going on in the jail, I think the sheriff can better answer that. But again, the sheriff is the one who's asked me to kind of come back into the picture here.
Okay, and it's just pretrial, so it's
Just
all folks
pretrial.
innocent until proven guilty?
That's
Okay.
right.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Justice Pond.
Thank you for coming and speaking to us. I'm very interested in finding out what you can find out and the results that you may get. I'd be interested in seeing the numbers that, I'd like to see a success rate.
Mm-hmm.
In some way, I've got an idea that after 3 or 4 months, you may come up with some good solutions to where our system could be worked a little, could be tweaked a little, where some of these folks may be falling through the cracks. I might say quite taken with the idea of you coming on board and using some of your experience, some of your expertise to find out some ways that you could help us. Thank you again for coming by.
My pleasure. And again, I'm coming into this with a completely open mind about what savings we can or cannot achieve for the county. We'll be learning as we go on, just like everybody else.
Thank you for your presentation, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
If we are going to proceed with this, I think the appropriate action would be to make a motion for the county attorney to draft an ordinance that we could take to finance and budget.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
My only caveat would be that we do a 90-day review. So once he's in seat for 90 days and working, that we have him come make a presentation to the court to show an ROI on the expense. And then assuming he's paying for himself, then we'll continue with the 11-month proposal that he has.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, you ready for the question? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Thank you. Sheriff, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. Would you get ready for the next session, or do you want to comment on this one?
May I make a request? I know that we have the city of Fayetteville and the city of Springdale present to discuss the topic after budget. I'm fairly certain they have no desire to listen to our budget presentation. Would it be permissible to let them leapfrog the budget talk? That's up to you. I'm just throwing it out there after your break, so.
Mr. Chairman, my only comment on that is I think maybe it might be beneficial if they heard our budget talk. our
If they heard the budget talks?
Yes, sir. I
All
would,
right.
I
Thank
would
you.
try to keep.
Thank you. Any other comments? We'll follow the agenda as written. We're going to take 5 minutes. You get ready for us. Thank you, sir.
I hope so.
Hey, y'all remember that? I mean, I don't think. No, because when it comes back to later, sometime later, they'll talk about how you shouldn't pay. Make their
Okay, we've got an update for you. What do we do here? Just push Windows is in service and update Hey, Brian. Last time I pushed one of these buttons, it went crazy. What I just pushed for it to go away. It's an update. Just okay or just
another time?
Another time. Okay. That's good. Last time I pushed it,
It shut down and reset.
It went nuts. I guess right now the attorney that works for the jail is Brian Lester. Is that correct? Because there's not one down there that's there every day. There's not a.
No, I'm the attorney for the sheriff of the jail.
Yeah.
What do you do in your spare time?
Read comments posted by one particular JP about how terrible of a job I do.
Is that particular one an attorney?
Was she speaking a little bit ago?
Like I was telling them, just remember she said $60 an hour is a bargain for an attorney. I was telling them I don't make that, so I would agree with her.
Maybe we need to get you a raise.
I just want to point out that
Okay, we have got lots of decisions to make about the jail and law enforcement and all those things. And in a conversation with the sheriff a couple weeks ago, I thought, I know I don't understand this budget. I've looked at bits and pieces, and most of it I've got off the website from the last 2 or 3 years' experience. So I asked the sheriff to come and go through the jail operations side of the budget with us tonight. We are going to have a chance to ask questions when we're done. We'll go around the panel when we're done. And let's keep our questions to questions. Okay? Sheriff, proceed.
Sure. So when Lance asked me to put together this educational process about our budget, I got with Jay and Randall and Alan. The one missing link to our staff that would normally be here is Captain Yates. He kind of takes care of our contracts with medical and food and those type of things, but we'll go over that anyway. But what I think would be the best way to proceed, I'm going to ask Chief Cantrell to come up and lead the discussion, describing to you each area. I'll have Major Denzer and Captain Johnson available for questions, and as the chairman stated, I think it would probably be best use of our time if we let Jay, as best he can, go through the budget, and then if you all would jot down questions or points that you need cleared up, maybe at the conclusion of the presentation, then we can kind of regurgitate and go back over what it is you're confused about. So with that being said, Jay, if you'll take this seat and then...
Yeah, bring a chair out.
Okay, I'm Jay Cantrell. I'm the Chief Deputy at the Sheriff's Office. Did everybody get a handout that we brought plenty? Tom, did you get one? Okay. So we'll kind of delve into the jail budget, and we didn't prepare to go real deep into the weeds, but we can go down at some point if you need to get really down to the very minutia of the budget. But the jail budget's kind of broken up into 2 sections. We have the detention part of the budget, and then we have the maintenance part of the budget. So the detention part is the first section. And that budget is broken into really 4 different areas. So we have our personnel section of the budget, then we have our supplies section of the budget, and our other services section, and then our capital outlay. So that's all the county budgets are kind of broken up into that same 4 overall categories. So we'll start with our jail budget, which was approved at $14.893 million last year in 2018, and then the capital that got neglected to be put in there was added, so that brought it up a little bit to $239,000 capital infusion that we buy cars with. But anyway, so we'll go through. Obviously, personnel is about a little over 78% of our overall budget, and that's the big part of it in the jail. And a lot of these things. In fact, we don't plug. The only numbers we plug into the personnel part of the budget from the sheriff's office are our overtime budget and our part-time budget, and the rest of these things are figured at the comptroller's office, as far as the health insurance matching and the holiday incentive and all those things, Social Security matching. So you can see that personnel part takes up about $11.8 million of our $15 million budget, just for the personnel. A couple of things to note there on the personnel side of the budget is our overtime. It shows that we've used 120%, but a lot of that is reimbursable overtime that will be reimbursed. We do extra security. When Walmart comes to town, they use every policeman they can get to secure the Walmart shareholders event. So they reimburse us completely. They reimburse us for our wages, for our workers' comp costs, for our retirement costs. So it's a full reimbursement from Walmart. So that money will be, a lot of this money will be infused back into our budget at the, possibly at tomorrow night's meeting. I haven't seen the agenda for tomorrow night, but every quarter, that money gets reimbursed, or reappropriated back into our necessary line items. So that's why the overtime budget looks kind of out of ordinary. Workers' compensation is kind of the same thing. Walmart and the university, when we work for them, they reimburse us for our workers' comp rate as well, so that money will get put back into that line item. So we go to the next page is our supplies budget, and the big elephant in that section is our food, and it's $830,000 of the 1.4 million, so it's over half our food costs. You know, we budgeted food to stay flat. We tried to keep our jail budget flat last year, but the food costs are population driven, so the higher our population is, the more our food costs will be. So we're probably going to go over in our food costs. Hopefully there'll be some areas that will be a little under. I'm certain we'll be a little under, or I'm not certain, but almost always we're a little under in personnel, because we have empty slots that, you know, it takes us a length of time when somebody leaves to get somebody hired to replace that person. So those personnel slots sit empty for a little while. That money is still budgeted to that slot, doesn't get spent, so it gets available at the end of the year to move into some of the areas that we might have gone over. So, like I say, $830,000 of the 1.4 million in supplies goes to food. Then $160,000 of that 1.4 is for fuel. And that fuel is for our transport vehicles that we go all over the United States. In fact, we just last month went to Hawaii to pick up a person on a forgery warrant, because, you know, when a warrant is issued, it's the sheriff's responsibility to go pick that person up. It doesn't matter if Fayetteville worked the original case, or West Fork, or Lincoln, or whoever worked the case. If it's a felony charge and Prosecutor Durrett issues a warrant, it's the sheriff's responsibility when that person's arrested to go get them, if they're out, you know, wherever they may be, if it's in Dumas, Arkansas, or if it's in Honolulu, Hawaii. So it costs about $6,000 to go to Hawaii and pick up a prisoner. Matt, back at the prosecutor's office, had some discretionary money in his budget, and he paid for half of that. So we're very grateful that he was agreeable to help us out with that, because that's a big transport. We've been to Alaska to pick up prisoners. We go all over the 50 states when somebody's arrested on one of our warrants. So $160,000 in fuel. That also pays for some fuel for our community services section of the jail, which is the people that are out picking up the trash on the road, taking the people out that may have a commitment of time to serve, but we allow them to serve that, to come into the sheriff's office, to meet us there, bring their work clothes, and go out and do whatever work needs to be done that day. And then when they get through the end of the day, then they go back home. So that keeps them out of the jail, but we have to have people to manage that, and vehicles to move them around to different places in the county to work. And then, you know, another big ticket item in that section is detainee supplies, which is uniforms they wear, the sandals or flip-flops they wear, the mattresses, blankets, the different things it takes for detainees. And then parts and repair, you know, that's, you know, we've got a big kitchen down there, so when something breaks, one of the skillets goes out, or a heating element, and then the oven goes out, that's monies typically come out of the parts and repairs line item. So those are the big ticket items in that section. Well, $150,000 for janitorial supplies, so, you know, the cleaning supplies, the disinfectant, the toilet paper, anything that has to do with janitorial supplies, that's budgeted $150,000. The next section is our services, and it's $1.5 million in that section of our budget, and $1.265 million of that goes for our medical. Now, that's a lot of money to pay for medical, but we've talked to some people that do this, and this is the way with the jails all across the country, is to go to a contracted medical provider. The Department of Corrections has a contracted medical provider now. Most of your county jails are going to it, just because when you do it yourself, you end up with medical personnel that take on the persona of a detention officer, and they fail to show much empathy to someone who's sick or ill. And the magistrate over here at our federal court, in fact, her words were that it seems like the contracted people show a little more love. And that was something that she appreciated, because they showed a little empathy, and versus county employees who are integrated with our jail staff, who kind of take on that persona. So, and a big selling point of having these contracted medical providers is they assume some of the liability should we get into a lawsuit. But I can tell you, with our current provider, he's a local doctor that has put together this proposal. We've had him for 3 years now, or this is our 3rd year. Done a phenomenal job. Our lawsuits have gone from 50 or 60 lawsuits with medical stuff to about 10 now, and we have no lawsuits that have a pending trial date. All of them are just in the exploratory stages. So we think that that's been a big asset to us. Is it reduces some of our liability. Plus, we've got phenomenal medical care, and but to get that, we have to pay for it. So anyway, that's the big line in that services section is 1.26 million out of the 1.54 million is just for medical. The rest of these are, as I told the sheriff, the rest of these are kind of small potatoes when you start looking at everything, or like we have to have a little bit of money in postage. And we should save some money in postage this year, because we've gone to an email system where detainees can send an email to their loved ones, and you can get an email. It costs them 50 cents to do that, but that's the same price it costs to mail a letter. And so we still provide indigent letters to someone who can't afford that. We provide them 2 a week, indigent envelopes, so that they can write. If they don't have any money, they still can have communication with the outside world. So that's the big section in, or the big ticket things in the services section. Then we go over to our capital outlay. We've got $7,500 in machinery. And Randall, what did you tell me that was for?
That's for garbage disposal.
That's for a new garbage disposal, 15 years old, and it's half the size of this desk. And so it's going to have to be replaced this year. We've rebuilt it as many times as we can, and it's about $7,500. And then the $239,000 is for vehicles for our transport and community service division. We've transported and moved in our transport division over 7,000 inmates just this year, from January through June. So we're moving people continuously to the doctor, to the different courts. We have 7 different divisions of circuit court. So, there's somebody going to court all the time. We have somebody going to a medical clinic or a medical facility, medical appointment, either OGC or some medical provider, transporting to the prison and back from the prison for court, going to Honolulu if we have to pick up a prisoner. So those vehicles are for our transport and community service divisions. That's our detention part. We've got about 1.2 million in our maintenance division. That maintenance division was a part of Dwight's operation up until a couple of years ago. It was funded with the dedicated sales tax money. However, it was part of the overall buildings and grounds. The decision was made that since they are dedicated to the jail, they don't go out and work because they're paid with the jail money. They don't go out and work on other county buildings, that this budget might be better off to be managed by the sheriff and his staff. So that was transferred over to us. It's still listed as a separate budget, but it's funded from the jail sales tax and other jail revenue items. So 1.2 million, 129,000 of that, 126,000 is personnel. The big thing on it over in the supplies section is obviously we have to repair. There's 67 rooftop units.
Yes.
So rooftop air conditioning units that require some form of maintenance, belts and filters. So 100,000 in parts and repairs. Building materials is different things they need to repair or work on the building. So just things it takes to run a 200,000 square foot operation. So then we got other professional services over in our services section is 193,000 was budgeted this year. Biggest portion of that is to reseal the building. There's a special spray that goes on the outside of those precast walls that recommended every 5 years that they be resealed, and then the rubber sealer that goes in between the joints be taken out and resealed every 5 years. So it's just preventative maintenance that we do. And then 530,000 is for utilities. So I know there were some questions a time back about wherever Johnson Controls was looking at including the jail in that proposal that they did and that the court ultimately passed. But they looked really hard at the jail, but they wanted to try, they thought they could retrofit some of our existing toilets and appliances in the jail, in the hard section of the jail. We went to the factory that makes these toilets, and they said, if you reduce it from 1.5 to 1.1 gallons per flush, the toilets will not operate. They will plug up almost every time. So they said, you know, we're making new toilets that will flush at 1.1, but you can't retrofit these. They will not work. So, you know, they're about $2,300 or $2,400 for a new stainless steel toilet for the jail. So we've discovered pretty quickly that we could not get the water savings that they thought we could. So that made it a little less attractive. And then they discovered that we had already done a lot of the LED upgrades. In fact, we've done most of the LED upgrades, and they weren't going to be able to get the energy savings from that. So it was going to cost us more out of our parts and repair line item because we weren't going to have the savings in the electric and the water section that they had hoped for when they originally looked at this proposal. So that's why we elected the Sheriff's Office to not participate, is because we just didn't think that, we didn't have the $300,000 extra in our budget to pay to make up the difference for what we weren't going to save on the utilities. So we thought that money might be better used, and we'll bring this in our 2020 budget proposal, is to put some money back for air conditioner replacement into a contingency fund that we just set it aside, and if we need it, we come and ask the court for it. Not just put it in there saying we might need it, just put it back in a contingency fund where y'all still have control over it, we don't have control over it. If we need it, we come to you. We'll bring that proposal to you later on at the official beginning of the budget cycle. So, and then over in capital, in the maintenance division, we've got almost $20,000 budgeted for a new dishwasher. We've got a big, huge dishwasher that is at the end of its life, and so we can get a smaller one, a smaller unit for a third the price that will do everything we need now. And if we do expand, then we can put another one beside it. There's ample room to put another one of these $20,000 units beside it. So that's what that $20,000 capital is for. You know, that pretty much covers the part I was going to talk about on all the jail budgets. You know, I will tell you that, you know, a lot of this food and the janitorial supplies, all of that's, as Randall says, population driven. You know, if you looked at your report for the jail, you know, we had 88 more people in June of 2019 than we had in June of 2018. So, you know, 88 more people is, that's a considerable number increase that, you know, requires this care, and you know, the law says that we're to feed and keep the inmates or detainees. So the feeding's the easy part. The keeping is all that other stuff that goes along with it, the medical and the janitorial supplies and the toilet paper, all that thing. So anyway, we'll be happy to try to answer any questions you have. Yeah.
Before you do that,
Yes.
run through the income sheet.
Okay. Now this income, the first page of the that we did was the jail fund 2019 projection. These numbers come from Treasurer Bobby Hill, and so he had estimated that, or projected we'd have about $600,000 in carryover this year, that money that we didn't spend from our 2018 budget. and I think that ended up being just over 400,000 when all the 2018 bills were paid. He has estimated that we'll take in $10,475,000 in sales tax. Now, that number is up a little bit, up a few percentage points over his projection. Whether it'll hold or not, I don't know, but he's pretty conservative with that projection. If you look at the next page back, last year we actually received 10.4 million, and he's projected 10.475. So he's been pretty conservative with his number, and we like it when it comes in at just a little higher. It gives us a little more flexibility and maybe not use all that $1.5 million general fund. So you can see we have a county ordinance that allows us to charge $20 fee for everybody that's processed through one of the district courts. That brings in $500,000. Jail fees are part of a administration of justice fee that we get. State prisoner care at 1.6 million. Other counties is 565 is his projection, and that's Madison County. That's the only other county that we hold for. And then federal care, he's projected at 1.1. And as of June, the 1st of June, we'd already received 800,000. So that's going to come in ahead of schedule, the federal prisoner care. So prisoner care city, that's the contract we have with the city of Fayetteville that charges them a one-time $62 booking fee. That's just a one-time fee they pay per person that they bring in on a Fayetteville municipal court charge. Doesn't include their felons. And then we get some commissary money in for the things we sell at the little jail store, if you want to call it that. Candy bars and Cokes and T-shirts and different things they can buy at the store. We get a commission off of that. Get a little commission off medical. Copay. So if they want to see the doctor, it costs them $2 or $3 if they have it. A lot of them would rather spend that $2 or $3 on ramen noodles or candy bar than go see the doctor. But if they need to see the doctor, they don't have any money, they get to see the doctor. It's not you have to pay. It's that if you've got money on your account, then there's a small copay you have to pay. And then obviously the treasurer charges. He's allowed by law to charge a commission for administering all our funds. And he charges $215,000, but he doesn't think he'll spend but $30,000 of that. Then the rest of it, reimbursement salaries are those funds that we get from when we help the university, or if we transport a U.S. Marshal prisoner, they reimburse us for those salaries. If we have to go to the hospital and watch one of their detainees who's in our jail, they reimburse us fully for those hours that we spend there. So anyway, that's kind of the projected income. He projected $15,722,000. There's a 10% holdback on some of those funds. It does not include the jail sales tax, which is a dedicated sales tax. So he doesn't have to do the 10% holdback like he does on the general fund monies. But some of these funds, he does have to hold back 10%. So anyway, we're at 16.2 million, 16.3 million for our total budget. He's projected 15,722,000. Thus, the shortfall and the infusion from the general fund is at 1.5. I think is what it came out in the budget. Doesn't mean we'll spend it, but that's the budget. Okay. Then the next page is just the actual revenues we received in 2018. So you can look at those and pretty much make that out. So anyway, we'll be happy to try to answer any questions you might have or delve down in the weeds.
I'm looking at the first page on this statement of operations on salaries. What was your 2018 budget on salaries?
120, they're all.
On salaries, total salaries for 2018, I don't know if I have that number with me. It's, you could probably look it up on the county's website. It's on there, but I don't have that 2018 number with me.
I'm looking at the approved budget from, looks like December of 2017. Okay. And it shows 4.9 million. And so I was trying to understand
make sure you're on jail. You may be on enforcement.
Yeah, you're on enforcement.
So this is just, we're just doing the jail tonight.
On the right
We'll be at fund number 3017 in the enforcement's 0400. Because that 4 point something sounds like the enforcement.
Okay. I guess a better way to ask the question is, do you know what the STEP program that was voted in last year, what that will cost?
You know, for the jail section, it's about, it was about 60 or so thousand, and then after the initial was about 60,000. Then for the jail part, it's just going to be a $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 incremental step after that. So the big expense was the first year, and then it's just they're about 4% or 5% increases on each step.
Okay.
So
and then-
that's for the jail. That's just for the jail section of the step. The big part of the step was out of enforcement. The enforcement part
So
of
the
budget.
60 grand is from the jail?
It's for the jail portion. It might 60 or 80, something like that.
And then
Was
what about the enforcement? What is that then? That's the 4 or 5?
Yeah, that was 900 and some thousand. It's 900 some thousand total, and about 60 or 80. Eva might remember better than me. She's a lot better with numbers than I am. But anyway, those pretty close. About 860 or so thousand, 70,000 for enforcement initially, and then.
So ballpark of $1 million a year?
Not a year. No, that was the first time to get everybody up into the steps. And then the steps only increment about 5%.
Right, but the increase would be $1 million, so if your budget was $4 million, now it's $5 million, and then every year it's gonna be $5 million plus this step.
Right, yeah,
Yeah,
correct.
so,
yeah.
I mean, it is an impact of over $1 million a year.
Well, $1 million the first year, now it's, it'll, that million's still gonna have to be paid.
Right.
Plus the 5 or 6%, whatever the step is.
And then, I knew, this is just the Johnson Controls thing, my understanding, that was a guaranteed savings. I get if the toilets are retrofitted, and I understand that, I don't want to get into the weeds too
Right.
much, but was there any other opportunity for savings? I mean, why didn't you participate in that
Well,
if they guaranteed you
because they
money?
were gonna, because the savings wouldn't come to what they thought. They said, okay, we're gonna need 300,000 out of your operations budget, which we think you'll be able to save some of that, they said, in parts and supplies, but our parts and supplies don't come to 300,000. So we were gonna have to come up with some money somewhere else, and the only other place to get it is from you all.
So they just wanted you to self-fund? I thought it was funded through the savings
Well,
itself.
they thought initially it would for the jail, but then they determined that the utility savings weren't gonna be nearly as good as what they had first thought at the jail.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, so like for Mr. Gonzalez, he had a lot of money he was having to pay for parts and services and to have a repair company come down, and we weren't having to spend that. We kind of got a little contract with people that maintain them, that do some preventative maintenance, and we were able to do a lot of the work ourselves. So we weren't spending that $400,000 or $500,000 or $600,000 a year like maybe he was on his parts and supplies and professional services to have people work on it. So we just didn't. We were spending $80,000 or $90,000 a year in all our parts, not just our air conditioner parts. So
Okay. No, that's helpful. That was my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
There's a lot of questions. We don't want to start.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, we're to item 8. Item 8 is an ordinance to establish a daily fee charged to municipality for housing prisoners in the county jail. Justice Deakins.
Thank you, sir. So I've worked with some County Attorney Lester to come up with this number and this ordinance. As we know, every budget cycle that we have yet to go through, but if you've been a part of this public and you're new on this court, we have a funding issue with our jail, and that goes beyond just the consideration of a possible expansion that we might have to do. So I have brought this to the court for its consideration to try to help alleviate that and hopefully give the jail a little bit more flexibility in its processes moving forward, and hopefully maybe even to continue to find things like fund other studies or something like that for the operations of this jail. So that's why this has come here. One of the main questions I've had on this ordinance that I'd like to address, if you look down on the bottom of the first page of the ordinance, is the daily fee. We have it listed here. I have it listed here at $76.57 per day. I've gotten a lot of questions about that because as a quorum court, we throw around $60, $61, $62 a lot, and I think that number is a little bit fast and loose, if you will. This came from our last audit, so this is what the auditors can confirm, that there are direct expenses for a daily use fee. So I would make a motion that we pass this to the full quorum court for its consideration.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Let me let the committee. Justice Harbison.
I thought we already had agreement with the cities that we were going on a per capita and that this would go into effect in January of this year. So I was surprised when this came up. So anyway, we had a meeting with everybody and we discussed it, and I thought that was the general consensus. I'm just surprised that we're still discussing this. Thank you.
Justice Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, as I recall, it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, that I brought this very subject up. And during that year and a half, 2 years, I've interfaced with the enforcement people and with the sheriff and the city people. And I'm telling you, I want them to come forward tonight and share some of the details with you about the complications involved in this kind of a process. Number one, it's hard for them to figure out a budget, what they're going to be able to pay. Number two is a matter of where a crime was committed and where they were arrested and who gets charges, or if there's multiple charges with a single prisoner, what's the responsibility, and the list goes on. But I'd like for them to come and share with you why we talked about an interlocal agreement. Now, I don't think they think there's ever been a proposal given to them about interlocal agreement. So I'd really like to have some of those folks come forward. I talked to our mayor from Springdale and asked him to come tonight. And I'd like to have his perspective, as well as the sheriff and some of the other enforcement people, about the complexity of this kind of issue.
Okay, let's let the other JPs make their comments and then we'll proceed. Justice Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one question about what we're envisioning other governmental agencies to mean. Because it's not defined, so I don't know what that means. Okay, so we don't know what it means?
I don't have any, state the question again, please.
It talks about we will charge this to house municipal and other governmental agency prisoners. So obviously the cities understand it applies to them. I don't know what other governmental agency prisoners means.
Can you help, Brian? I don't know.
I think it would be, based on my conversation with JP Deakins, it was just any agency that brought prisoners to the jail.
Well, because the university sent us a letter that said we don't
Right,
have
they
the
think they don't
authority.
have to pay, and based on,
I mean, because are we trying to have it apply to the state? I mean, I read it to think, oh my gosh, this applies to the feds, this applies to ICE, this applies to the state, this applies to the university, which to me was really broad. And I wasn't sure if, we needed to have those people at the table to talk about this, so.
I think it would apply to anybody that arrested and brought someone into the jail pending charges being brought. I don't know that ICE or the feds arrest and bring people to our jail that often. I know we have contracts with a lot of them, so which would be different than this particular, I believe. But I don't know. I don't know what we're talking about.
But the goal is, though, to give the feds a break and charge our cities more than we charge the federal government? Really? make the cities charge more than Madison? Can we charge Madison County? I
No,
think
this
we
would apply
really
to
need to
Madison
rethink
County.
that.
This would apply to any agency that uses the jail.
Well, but you're saying it's just those arrested and brought to us, and so if a Madison County is paying us to house someone post adjudication, that wouldn't apply, because this just applies from arrest till either charge of a felony, sentencing, or release.
I don't know why, I don't know of any, and the sheriff could answer, anybody in Madison County that we would hold post-arraignment or post-conviction just because Madison County wants them in jail. I mean, those become state prisoners. There's a point where these people become state prisoners. So we don't hold anybody just because the city goes, hey, would you just hold them for a little bit extra even though
Well,
they've
but
been
Madison County
sentenced?
doesn't have a jail, so I mean, if they're sitting there, I guess my point is though, that either we're making this to apply to everybody, or I don't understand how we're gonna say the feds are getting a better deal than we're giving our own cities. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we charge the feds double what we charge anybody else. And I think some places do. Some counties charge the feds $200 a day. So I think we need to know what other governmental agency prisoners means and what other governmental agencies we are envisioning this applying. And if we are not envisioning it applying to every entity that we charge, then we need to get everybody on the same place. Because I don't think it's.
Well, then make a
anyway.
recommendation. I mean, this is being presented. Your job here is to look at this and say, hey, we need to change this.
I
instead of
understand what
just
my job is.
bringing a
Thank you,
point
Mr.
up to make a
Lester.
big
I'm just-
argument just for the sake of making an argument. So if there's a suggestion, I'd be happy to write this down and take notes. I typically do that when y'all make changes to ordinances. I write them down and I immediately go in and redraft them and make those changes. But I
Okay.
can't unless you tell me what it is you want me to
Well, I'm not on the committee,
do.
and there's a motion pending, so I don't have a way to do that right now. Thank you.
Justice Ecke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question would be to our county attorney, Mr. Lester. Did we not, in the previous court, come to a resolution that we would have an interlocal agreement with the municipalities per capita on that? Because, I mean, I thought it was passed.
Never went nowhere.
I mean, from what I understand, when we had everybody here, and we saw the complications of if a Fayetteville police officer pursues an assailant into Springdale, they're not going to continue the pursuit because, well, no, then Fayetteville's going to get charged the money, so I'm not going to do it. And if they're in Elm Springs, I'm not going to do it. And it got complicated. So we thought, I mean, from what I remember, I thought we came to a resolution that, or a contract to enter an interlocal agreement with the municipalities based on per capita.
There was a motion and discussion and a vote passed to encourage the judge to do just that, which there has been an agreement, contract put out. But as far as, and I stated this, as far as the law is concerned, the only action the quorum court itself can do is to enact a daily fee.
So what the contract, I'm just trying to connect the dots. Logically, did we not enter a contract, did the judge not enter the contract with the mayors of the municipalities in our county? No.
They haven't finalized any contract yet, no.
In my opinion, that takes precedent over, then, once that's done, it comes to the quorum court for approval. That is not, that is.
That's for
what
an
we-
interlocal agreement. And
That
there's
we
a
were gonna
whole big
charge
slew of
per-
other problems. You've all got a letter, and so you can see that Prairie Grove, the attorney for Prairie Grove, Steve Zaga, does not feel like an interlocal is appropriate because they don't get a say in the budgeting. And that is part of what the state law says. When you enter into an interlocal agreement, they get to have a spot or a say in the budgeting. And so that's why they weren't going to move forward with it. So I don't think it's an interlocal. I think it would be a contract that we would enter into, that would be entered into between the county and the cities.
And so we're not going to, so whatever the previous court did is not going to be pursued because Prairie Grove is not going to, I mean, I'm just trying to reconcile this in my thinking.
Well, the court can only make pass a resolution. The court can't We don't have anything to do with entering into the interlocal agreement.
No, but we passed this on, and I thought that was done, and then once that's done, it comes back to us for approval.
No.
An interlocal would come back to you for approval, yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just trying to reconcile this. But I know that it should be per capita. Thank you.
Justice Leming.
Thank you, Chair. What we did study this, but it's never went nowhere. It's dead. And that's, I mean, I think this right here, it may not be the answer, but it'll get the ball rolling and we'll get something going. But the other deal, it was talked about, and the sheriff even had meetings down there, and we talked to the mayors, and the mayor was there. The gentleman back here was back there. And the per capita was talked about. And that's a good deal. But there again, the per capita is going to fill your jail up fast if they use it wrong. The per day is a better deal, but the per capita for the city's sakes for budgeting is a better deal. So it's been talked about, but it never went nowhere. Since I've been on the Quorum Court, I heard it's been talked about a lot. Thank you.
Justice Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious, what is the rules, Mr. Lister, as far as when a ordinance is presented, how long it needs to be out there before we bring it before committee or court?
You enacted a rule that said it has to go to a committee
Right.
before it comes to the quorum court.
But does it have to
Otherwise-
be public knowledge brought before committee
No.
for a certain amount of time?
No, once it goes to the quorum court, unless it's an appropriation ordinance, it can be passed on the first reading if there's at least 10 votes, or it has an emergency clause.
Okay.
If it does not, then it has to have 3 distinct and separate readings before it can be voted on and approved or denied, basically.
I bring that up because I had concerns from mayors in my jurisdiction, District 10, who I contacted once I read this on Friday, who were unaware and would have loved to been able to schedule to be here to discuss their concerns. So I feel like before a vote goes forward, we should be able to make sure that there's adequate time that the public has knowledge of it.
Justice Leming.
What I want to say to that is Ernie was at the same meeting that I was at. He's very much aware of this is going on.
Today.
Well, he's very much aware of the per capita and the price that we're trying to get paid. So is Doug Hudgens and Lincoln. I mean, they've all been aware and they've all was there. So they know it's in the background and we're trying to do something with it.
All where?
When we had the meeting with the sheriffs and the
When?
mayors was there and we talked about all this.
When was that again?
Tim, could you tell us when the dinner breakfast was that day?
Hey, let's keep our discussion to the germane to the motion on the
Okay,
floor.
thank
Justice Deakins.
So, I understand that this is a very tough decision. I understand we got hard decisions to make in front of us. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to alleviate some of the hardships on our sheriff. Just like some of the comments of my colleague, the timing of this, we've been talking about this, and we've been talking about this, and we've been talking about this, and I think it's time for the county to take some leadership and some ownership of their own county jail. And I know that's very problematic from some municipal situations. I want to respond to a couple of points that were made so people know what my intent are that were brought up here. Once again, I see a lot of frustrations with interlocal agreements. I think that subjects us to some oversight from the cities that could be problematic from the future. It's also my understanding that if we enter an interlocal agreement with all the municipalities, it has to be complete, if that's my understanding. Every municipality has to sign on to that for it to go into force. It won't be onesies or twosies, right? Every municipality in Washington County has to agree to the interlocal agreement.
I think what you're asking is, can you enforce, if only the majority of cities enter into the interlocal, can you enforce it on everybody? And the answer is no.
Right.
So only the municipalities that were to agree and sign off on the interlocal would be subject to the agreement.
Yeah. So this absolutely keeps the control at the county level. And it makes us make sure that as elected officials, we're keeping the power here, and we're looking out for the best interests of the jail for a countywide perspective. Budgeting, I've heard a lot of concerns about that from cities. I have no doubt that data can be pulled on what city arrested what person and how long they stayed in jail. We can do that on a 12-month rolling average. We'll get you whatever data that you need to try to help budget that. In fact, some of the timing of this particular ordinance is to consider that very much right now for cities who are going through a budget process, just like we will be doing pretty soon ourselves, should already be doing. And then lastly, comment on what does other government agencies mean? As many as we can charge the daily use fee for fair use of our resources and things like that. So, I don't know how realistic that is from a standpoint of the state. I'd love for the state to pay us the agreed upon rate, but I understand that we have to subject ourselves to that level of government. So that was my intent for anyone that we can charge our full fair rate to. That's my intent here with this ordinance. Now, legally, if there needs to be some wording or something like that worked on, I absolutely invite amendments and revisions to that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Justice Madison.
I just have one follow-up. So I understand what all the whereas clauses say about the Mississippi County decision, but looking at Article 1, it is not in any way limited to pretrial or arrests. It purports to impose a daily fee per prisoner, and I think that is going to get us into no man's land in terms of charging. I think that is because the only part of it that's actually legally enacted is Article 1. The whereas clauses are just context. And so I think that if your intent is to just charge from the point somebody brings someone to the jail until they're charged with a felony, released on a misdemeanor, or sentenced on a misdemeanor, that's got to be written into the articles. Because right now, I don't see that the background of the Mississippi County decision is part of it. So that's why I look at it and think we're charging everybody everything for any day. That's why I thought it was Madison County, like for however long we keep somebody for Madison County. Because if I'm Madison County, I'm not exactly advocating for Madison County here in this. I'd like them to pay us more, but I would think I might have to make up that difference for what the state's paying us. So I just think that needs a lot more tightening up if this is to go anywhere, because, and I think there needs to be a lot more guidance in terms of how we classify who's arrested and whose responsibility it is. Because if we're gonna rely on cities to be able to do the numbers, they're gonna have to have more certainty. And one more thing, I think the per capita issue was just I think I may have proposed this, I know J.P. Bowman talked about it at one point. It was to take each city's population and cap what they would pay annually based on some dollar multiplier of their own population so that they could control it for budget purposes. So I don't think it was somehow a goal to fill the jail. I think it was just a goal to give cities the budgeting certainty, because we were saying one set of numbers and like cities were saying like 10 times that. So I think for an introductory measure, if that's where you're going, I think you ought to put some kind of per capita cap just to give certainty. It would bring us in revenue, but it would not have the fear of the unknown for the cities for trying out a new thing. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Other comments from the committee? If there's no other comments, let's take public comments. Would those in the public who'd like to speak come forward? Please state your name and please limit your comments if possible to 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Mayor Doug Sprouse, City of Springdale. I apologize for my appearance. If you get close to me, I will smell like a big green egg, because that's what I was doing before I came down here. I was part of the meeting, the breakfast meeting, and then there was a meeting following the breakfast. Several mayors were in that meeting. I left with the, I won't say assurance, but with a strong opinion that the consensus was that the per capita charge was the best route to go for budgeting purposes, because each year before cities enter into their budget process, each year you could look back and the county would also have their projected shortfall. And that number That number may change every year, but we would make up that shortfall on a per capita basis. That way, whether you're in a city, whether you're in an unincorporated area of the county, every county resident is paying equally for the service. And that's what you're paying for, the service. I know there's been discussion in the past about, well, the burden for this ought to be on the cities because that's who brings the most prisoners. Well, that's not right either. You're paying for the service, just like for an ambulance or for a fire truck or anything else. Because there are people, I can assure you, there are many, many people in Springdale, more people in Springdale will never have to call a police officer than those that do. So this should be spread equally throughout every resident of the county. It was pretty much, and I'm giving deference to this body because many of you weren't a part of those discussions yet. But when you started peeling away the layers of this onion of a per day, per prisoner fee, we were I'm telling you, we would create a hairball that we would never unwind. And so when this came up, when this was brought to me today that this was a possibility again, I was quite surprised. We've not seen an interlocal agreement. We're certainly, nobody wants to pay more. I get that. But the city of Springdale will pay our fair share. If everyone is paying the same per resident, then I think that's fair. And we can budget for a per capita much easier, and it takes away all the questions about if your deputy pulls somebody over in Tawnytown and they take off and they come into Springdale and then Springdale takes chase and then they go into Fayetteville and then they end up coming back into Springdale and Springdale finally makes the arrest, whose prisoner is it? There are all kinds of questions that are going to be very difficult to work out if a per prisoner per day fee is imposed. I don't, Mr. Lester, I'm not sure, I'm not in tune with the law on interlocal agreements. I guess I've got a question, and that's if a city was not agreeable to signing on to an interlocal agreement, could they not be charged the per prisoner per day fee?
Absolutely.
Okay, that seems like that takes care of that issue. I can tell you that based on, the devil's always in the details, but based on our discussions, I would certainly support the city of Springdale signing on to such an agreement for a per capita fee if the amount is justified. And you all project your revenues and project your costs every budget cycle just like we do, and we should be able to come up with a per capita fee that's shared equally among every resident of the county, whether rural or in a municipality. That's all I have. That's probably over 3 minutes.
That's correct, Mayor, but we're good with it, and I'll remember it.
Thank you all.
Next speaker.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Greg Tabor, I'm the police chief at Fayetteville. Mayor couldn't be here tonight. I think I'll agree with most everything Mayor Sprouse said. I can tell you, I was at that breakfast meeting also. There was a lot of things talked about, $31, $62, I think even heard $80. So I'm not really sure what idea I left there was going to happen, but what I can tell you, I had never heard this amount that's on this resolution until this weekend when somebody sent it to me and said, hey, do you know about this? And it was the first I saw that. So I do agree that over the weekend, I got an email. That's the first time I saw that. Give you a little history. I can't even remember if I've said this here before or not, but we closed our jail in 2005, started contracting with the county. At that time, we, Fayetteville PD, were arresting about 10,000 people every year. Obviously, we've had a huge population increase since that time. I don't know what that number is. Some up there probably knows. But what I can tell you now is we're down below 5,000 people that we actually arrest and take to the county. I'm sure we're probably still your biggest customer, but obviously I think the people in jail, there's obviously a lot of concern about that. all the way around the board. So what I'm telling you, we have already reduced that by half over the last few years. We will continue to work hard to keep that number low and reduce. If we go to daily rate, we're just not going to start throwing everybody in jail. The jail is very busy. When an officer takes someone to jail, they have to spend an inordinate amount of time down there sometimes. So we try to write a citation to anybody we can. There was a situation happened, I think it was in 2014, on Class A misdemeanors. The law says Class A misdemeanors, you have to be fingerprinted and photographed. The judge at that time wrote an order for us to be able to cite those people. So now what happens, that Class A misdemeanor that we had to arrest and take to jail to be fingerprinted and photographed, we now write them a citation. They're released right on the side of the road, and then when they go to court, the court makes arrangements for them to go to the jail and get that fingerprint and photograph at a later date. So that's one of the ways we try to cut down, and I promise you, no matter what we do here, we're going to continue to be working to cut down on the number of people we take to jail, because obviously it means a lot to our officers. We have to pay for that, whether it's a daily rate, per capita rate. We can use that money other places, and obviously the officer's time is very valuable out on the street instead of sitting in the jail waiting for a prisoner to be booked in. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. I'm Mike Peters. I'm the Springdale Police Chief. And I'd like to agree with most everything Chief Tabor said and Mayor Sprouse. We have similar arrest numbers as Fayetteville. We only use the Washington County Jail for felons. While our numbers are up into probably the 10,000 range, I have no idea how many people we bring to jail, because almost every single one of them are released. The only difference in our process is we do bring them in, fingerprint them, photograph them, and release them. On the felons, that would be what would affect us immediately. We have a wonderful working relationship with the sheriff and with the Washington County Prosecutor's Office. I believe that a per-day fee is going to complicate that greatly. Just like Fayetteville and just like every other city, we're going to be conscious of our budgets. And right now, when we have a case going forward, we contact the prosecutor's office. We determine the most efficient way to handle that. And oftentimes, it's that we go out and we pick them up. There's other ways to do that we're going to save money. And I've talked to the prosecutor, and he's concerned about the workload it's going to put on him. I've talked to the sheriff. Any way we go with this, we're going to work with him, and we're going to do everything we can to minimize the people we bring down here. But we're going to be shutting our jail down next year, and we're going to be in pretty much the same boat as Fayetteville is. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Other comments? You ready for the question? The motion on the floor is to pass this ordinance to the full quorum court with a due pass recommendation. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Let's have a raise of hands. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? The vote's 3-3. The motion fails. Yes.
I would like for the county judge to, when we started this, it was told that we could not, the quorum court could not have an interlocal agreement, that it had to be between the county judge and the cities. And I just want to encourage the county judge to get with the cities and work out this interlocal agreement. Thank you.
So you're abstaining?
Justice Leming.
Can we add to this motion and maybe make it a per capita?
No, we can't do that.
We can't do that? Can't do anything with that? Okay, thank you.
Justice Duncan.
We can look at historical data and project, I bet down to like a 2% variance, how much it's going to cost each municipality. Like, it's not going to be a big surprise. It won't be a shock, and you're going to be paying for the people that you send to jail. So we can look at the last 12 months, project it out, and I'm willing to bet it won't be bigger than a 2% variance. So I know that everyone went crazy last, what was it, November, December, over charging a daily rate, but that's unrealistic. Like, we'll put math behind it. It's not that hard. And we'll actually apply, hey, here's what it's going to cost you over the year. We don't have the power on this court to make a decision to do the per capita. I wish we did, because we just vote for it and get it done. We don't, though. So the general fund's bleeding. We got to fill that hole somewhere. So we're either going to have to raise taxes somewhere else, or we're going to have to start charging the people who are sending people to jail. So, I mean, I don't know what to do. So is there a way to bring this back up?
We can rewrite a new ordinance.
Next month.
So expect to see a new ordinance next month then with some modified language.
Okay. It's time for public comment.
Is the public comment just on this last issue? Or
I
in
can't
the whole
hear.
meeting?
Sir, if you don't speak at a mic, I can't hear you.
I was asking, is the public comment for the entire meeting?
Yes.
We're done.
Thank you. My name is John Comstock. I'm a resident of Rogers. I just wanted to say this. First, I applaud you for approving the going forward with the ombudsman. I think that's excellent. I taught at the University of Arkansas School of Law several semesters a criminal law class. And one of the things that we have to remind ourselves, and I had to remind law students and folks that were not in law school at that time, they were maybe pre-law students, and that is the presumption of innocence. And Ms. Justice of the Peace, I certainly don't, I mean, I pointed to you, I talked to you, but I want you to know, we all make this mistake. We think because somebody's in jail, they did a crime. Please, we need to tell ourselves, and it's hard, it requires effort, but when you're talking about pretrial detainees, what being in jail tells us is they got arrested. It doesn't mean they committed the crime. It doesn't mean that they are guilty. There is that presumption of innocence, and I'm just throwing this out there to hold on to that thought. And then do know this, with the ombudsman, I hope within a month or less that you're going to be able to hear of another program that's going to come to Northwest Arkansas that's going to supplement what you're going to do with the ombudsman. And it'll be an organization that will help provide three things that folks in pretrial detention being released need. One is they need reminders to come to court, actually. Another one is transportation to come to court. And the third one is a link to services. And we hope that when you see that being done, that you're going to see the failure to appear rate go down. Because keep in mind what Mr. Edelman told you, and I would just end with this point. It's an intellectual discipline on our part to tell ourselves that failure to appear is not the same thing as absconding. I know under a state law statute, maybe it might be defined in such a way that you could call it that, but do think about what he said to you. The typical failure to appear didn't leave the city, didn't leave the county, they didn't leave their mobile home, their apartment, their house, whatever. They didn't leave, they didn't go anywhere. A lot of people are arrested right at their homes. Failure to appear because of why didn't they show up in court that day? Like he said, maybe they had an anxiety attack. Maybe they didn't have transportation, whatever. Abscond, somebody who literally flees the jurisdiction of the court with the intent that they never be held accountable for the offense that they're charged with. Two different things, and I just throw that out. It requires all of us to remind ourselves of that, and I'm just challenging you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments?
I apologize for my shorts. My name's Lou Reed Sharp, and I live at 1739 Steel Road, Springdale, Arkansas. And when I became aware of the daily rate going up like that, and I talked to a couple of mayors, they were not aware of it. And so I hope, we talked about leadership tonight, that the quorum court will talk to the different mayors, because I'm concerned with, and I talked to JP Leming, what's it going to cost Lincoln, Arkansas? Because it directly impacts their budget. So it just seems to me like floating an ordinance with that little notice when it's going to directly impact our neighbors and friends, that we need to, I would encourage the court to talk to the different municipalities, because just throwing it out there on somebody based on a conversation at a breakfast or something just seems very unfair to me. And certainly the mayors I talked to were not aware of it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Without objection, this meeting's, you either ask.
Okay, Beth Koger, 3661 Embry Drive, Fayetteville. I want to thank the court, too, for moving forward on the ombudsman proposal. I think that's great. I think it's a good step forward, and it shows that we're taking some action. But and maybe I misunderstood some of the comments, some of the discussion, but that doesn't mean, does it, that we're not moving forward with maybe looking into the study from the criminal justice experts that we've talked about? Is that still a possibility? I mean, the ombudsman doesn't cure that, what we were asking for with that.
I haven't seen the agenda for next Thursday night, but I think it's on the
You
agenda.
don't know? Oh, it's on the agenda? Okay. Okay, I just wanted to make that certain. Thank you.
Sheriff Helder.
If I might indulge the court. I'm hungry too, so we'll get out of here. But in keeping with our commitment to keep pushing forward, knowing what I know that is looming in front of us, I think there was mention, I don't remember who, but during some of our meetings, whether it was one-on-one or in a courtroom, the potential of looking at the modular units for temporary fixes. I and my staff will be traveling to Springfield Wednesday to visit the Greene County Sheriff and their program where they have the temporary housing units in the event we determine that that's a course of action we want to go. Benton County is also going because they find themselves in a similar situation that we are. Mr. Gales will be accompanying us as well. So I will come back with a report on what they have to offer. Just options. So I just wanted to let you know that that'll be happening this week.
Justice Harbison.
Tomorrow on the Budget Committee, there were 3 ordinances that you haven't gotten a copy of yet. One of them has to do with some grant money. The other one has to do with FEMA money. These should be very non-controversial ordinances. And then there is one that deals with a line item transfer in the planning board. So you will be getting these, Ms. Burnett will be sending those out tomorrow morning. So be sure, you look at those before you get here. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Without objection, this meeting's adjourned.
What about